This tape is a continuation of the message.
I believe the Scriptures teach that we should be clean and neat, and if I can use this term, presentable. I don't mean stylish or fashionable. I mean clean, neat, presentable. I don't think you don't have any spiritual benefits, or you won't get any rewards for being as ugly and as dirty as you can be. I know that there are some women who just have no concern about their body. They won't, surely you're not one of them, but they won't brush their teeth or comb their hair or anything. That's very offensive. And yet she goes to church and praises God. And so that's very offensive to her unsaved husband back home. He thinks, what's your Christianity doing for you? Well, I wouldn't think that a person would take my words this morning as a justification to continue that way. We should be clean and neat and presentable. Stylish, modish, fashionable, that's another matter. We're in a different ballpark now. But I just about vomit when I go in churches and see women. You see a lot of teenage girls, up or down the age ladder, with just the right type of shoes and hose on. You'll find this at Faith Assembly, by the way. And by the way, let me say something about that. Freeman would get to these verses, and it's so ironic. They were so legalistic about certain things: no television, no sodomite shoes, and no prostitute purses. They'd get to these passages, and Freeman would explain them right away. He would say, now the Bible doesn't say that you can't wear a little bit of makeup, an appropriate amount, and curl your hair appropriately. He'd explain that right away. And that was so ironic for someone who was so bent on the narrow way and old-time fundamentalism. And I think that's why that he had so many criticisms in the past, and probably rightly so, with the old fundamentalist attitude, that when he came to these passages, invariably he smooths them right over, brushes over them real quickly, and you can tell by looking at the women. And Melanie and I have noticed that time after time we've been there, how fashionable and how stylish a lot of the women are. With really nice clothes on, attractive clothes and attractive shoes, high heels and hose and curled hair and rings, jewelry, painted fingernails. And I'm sure a lot of them did it, let's say, quote, in innocency, unquote, without really knowing. They thought that was what was expected of them because that's the way Freeman taught. And I thought, all these years, every time I'd hear that, I thought, how ironic. You're the one church that could care less what other people thought about you, and yet here's an area where you're very concerned. You're teaching the people to dress in a fashionable, stylish way. And some of the rest of you have been down there. Perhaps you've noticed that, how stylish a lot of the women have been. really neat and proper. It was noticeable enough that it knocked us off my shoes, my chair the first time I went in there. The first time after the first time. That'd be the second time in 1981. I expected people just to kind of have their heart so set on God that they weren't too concerned about the way they looked. They were neat and presentable, but they weren't too concerned about the way they looked. I was shocked to find otherwise. And from the little conversations I picked up on with some of these women, they were so vain, talking about the vainest things, their hose and their handbags. Instead of talking about the message afterwards, it'd be about something vain. They took a lot of pride in what they were doing and what they were wearing. We had a church that I was a part of in Memphis. There were two teenage girls. As a matter of fact, they were both daughters of the pastor. And they hit those teenage years and began to blossom somewhat into womanhood, and oh, were they proud of that. They were as vain as a summer day is long. And the oldest one, who married when I think she was either 15 or 16, and she just thought she was the biggest thing that ever hit Tennessee to get married that young and show how mature she was. And she was as immature as a bullfrog. But she would come in with her fashionable clothing on, just walk. Her little prissy self, I just about wanted to knock her in the face. With her little prissy self. And here's what bothered me more than anything, is she would wear an anklet. Now, you know what an anklet is, surely. It's a bracelet. You women are shaking your head no. You women do. You're shaking your head yes. It's a bracelet that you wear on your ankle. You've seen those little gold things. You know what I'm talking about, anklets? She would wear an anklet. That's a gold bracelet wrapped around your ankle bone. I think what are you wearing that for? Whose attention are you trying to attract here? She thought that was so in style and so cool and so grown up. And you see, they had a background of poverty, and their father had been a garbage collector. And you see, when you've had that background, you try to come out of that, and you're not, and they were saved, but they didn't feel secure in the Son. And at one time they did. They just wore ordinary clothes, just ordinary. They weren't dirty. They weren't fashionable. They weren't bright colors. They were dull colors or in-between colors. And then all of a sudden they reached these certain years, and their parents started going back and celebrating Christmas and doing things they had forsaken earlier. And here these girls come out in their high heels and long painted fingernails and painted toenails and anklets and earrings and rings. That's about vomited on that. That annoyed me to no end. And eventually, as you know the story, that church just fell apart. They moved to Texas, and then it fell apart there, and you had to go get a job somewhere else. God's not going to bless confusion like that. You say, well, why is it all these other churches, big denominational churches, do that and are growing? But here was a group who had been given some light and truth, and they forsook it. It makes a big difference in the eyes of God. The old institutional church doesn't know anything. She's just as dumb as if she'd never heard or read the Bible. But here was a group who knew a lot of truth, that we're supposed to be different. But you see, them being different cost them members in their church. And that just drove the pastor up the wall. I felt sorry for him. I still feel for him now when I think about that. It's hard. You teach the truth, but no one receives it, and you lose all your friends. It's certainly not a way to win friends and influence people. But that's just the way that it is. And so we know it, and we know it now. We knew it in advance. If we're going to make the step into this commitment, we better make it with our head clear and with our eyes wide open. And none of us have ever had it like the Old Testament prophets did. In all the rumblings of our church, I've at least had a lot of you still around here. The prophets didn't have anybody. Their own families tried to kill them. Read Jeremiah. It's a sad story. And they didn't do it and say the things they did because they got some kick out of being different. Jeremiah many times went back and complained to God and cried on God's shoulder, God, deliver me from this. No one likes to have to do that in the natural self, unless you're really a weird person. Jeremiah was a normal person. But he said, there's a fire burning in my bones, and I can't stop. Thank God that he said that. Amen. Proved he was a true prophet, not a false one. It's a fire burning in my bones. The men of Anathoth, remember that was his hometown, a little northwest of Jerusalem. The men of Anathoth have conspired against me and my own family. He went back there one time during the break in a siege in Jerusalem to tie up some business matters, if you read his book carefully. And he found out that his family and friends had drawn up this elaborate conspiracy against his life. And all you're trying to do is give them the eternal life, give them the message of truth, and they're trying to kill you for it. So all we have to do if we ever feel sorry for ourselves is remember some of those biblical examples. And so far, none of us have been called to suffer any of that. Now, nothing is actually sinful in the cotton or the nylon or the gold or the pearl that came from a clam. Nothing's actually sinful in that. But it shows a person to be under a worldly influence. They've got a false mentality. They don't understand what spirituality is all about. There's nothing wrong in the gold or the nylon or the polyester or the silk or whatever. But I think scriptures like 1 Peter 3 and 1 Timothy 2 set in generals. See, we don't have lots of specifics that you must do this and can't do that, although we've got some specifics here of things you may not do. But it sets in a general tenor here that our calling is a spiritual calling, and all of our emphasis should be on that. That the outer man, what we wear, what we look like physically to one another, it's all perishable. You can find people who are beautiful physically, they are a wretch on the inside. You'd never want them for a friend. You can find people who are ugly physically that make a beautiful companion for life. That shows there's nonsense. It's all vanity, whether someone's pretty or ugly or their clothes are nice or whatever. It's all vanity. And here's my argument. The church is not thinking. She's falling into the trap of the world, being a clone of the world. She's not doing her own independent thinking. Just natural thinking would tell you that. But that doesn't produce anything in my life. to be right or to wear the in thing or whatever. Now, let me read a little bit of another article. I'll show you the picture in the first place. It was in, I believe, U.S. News and World Report. It's entitled, A Language Spoken Only by Believers, and it's about speaking in tongues. Now, here's a charismatic family. And look at them, the typical American family. What do they have, 2 children? Yeah, 2 children. Look at Mommy and her dress. Look at the girl, whose name happens to be Chrissy, and look at her little attitude. Look at her hair. Look at her dress. Look at the way her eyebrows are raised. A little show-off is what she is. And her church, wherever she goes, should not encourage an attitude like this. I just really hope that none of you would have seen this picture and just thought nothing of it, that you'd see it and something would stir in your heart. Listen to some of what this has to say. With a 2-car garage, charming youngsters, and a VCR in the den, they seem like the family next door on The Cosby Show. But the difference is, their names are Joyce and Charlie Brown, of all things. The difference is, Joyce, and they give the woman's name first, notice. I bet she did all the talking in the conversation when they interviewed her. There is a difference. Joyce and Charlie Brown speak in tongues. I never would have known it looking at this picture. They just look like a typical middle-class, affluent American family. Let's get into the end of this article. Ministerial preferences. The family attends 3 or 4 church meetings a week, including youth activities and Charlie's Friday night group study. Sean, 6, the boy, is a Royal Ranger. That's good Assemblies of God terminology. While Mandy, 3, is a Rainbow. That's, youth groups, children's church. Fundamentalists answer to Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. They also watch the television evangelist. Charlie likes John Ankerberg, the Tennessee talk show evangelist who has sided with Jimmy Swaggart in the Baker controversy. He's a bit informative. He's fun, but he's a bit more informative, Charlie says. He's the Phil Donahue of religious TV. Again, comparing people to someone else out there in the world. Joyce, 39. I think she's a little bit older than her husband. Maybe that's why they let her speak first. Prefers the PTL Club, lately known as the Jim and Tammy Show. She says, I like the music, the guests, and the ministers, and I really like Tammy. She's fun. Some of you are saying, oh, ooey, guck. She's fun. She's fun, and she ministers to you. I'm inspired, and I feel joy, and I feel full of the love of the Lord whenever I'm through. Oh, come on. That flaky, wicked witch. Chrissy, now here's the teenager. She's the one who crawls all over my skin. Chrissy is the proverbial all-American teenager whose current goal in life is to become a cheerleader. What has your Christianity done for you? But the church encourages all of this. Yet this summer, this is to show her religious side, this summer she'll spend 10 days in Jamaica, not on the beaches, but as part of a youth mission to a poor quarter in Kingston. While she says she cringes at Charlie's, her father's, early morning prayer walks in their neighborhood because he prays aloud to himself. She's embarrassed over that because her friends in the neighborhood will learn. They're supposed to already know that you are the weirdos on the block. Why haven't you already told them that? Why haven't you lived it so you didn't have to tell them? While she cringes at Charlie's early morning prayer walks in the neighborhood because he prays aloud in tongues to himself, she nonetheless eagerly sings in the church's special youth choir. It says both of the parents are divorced and remarried. They met when Joyce began attending the singles group that you know who was the head of, Charlie Brown, that Charlie had organized in a charismatic church that he discovered while attending college in Charlotte. This is in North Carolina. So they're divorced and remarried, and they're teaching the children the same type of lifestyle they have lived. I forget what he does for a living. He's a successful traveling salesman. That makes sense. He just fits the role right perfectly. Now listen to this, and I'm going to pass the article, let you look. Look at her fingernails, look at Chrissy's eyebrows, look at everything on her, and look at the mother too. Humor is not absent in this intensely spiritual household. The indomitable Charlie teases Joyce about wanting to go to heaven for the perfect suntan. You know, you're closer to the sun. Ha ha, it's a joke. But it has some truth to it, or why would he kid her of that? In other words, she's always wanting to be out in the backyard, the mother, to get a suntan. And he criticizes Chrissy for wanting to, but it's in a joke, you know. There's a lot of humor in this intensely spiritual household. And Chrissy for wanting to drive a Porsche when she meets her maker. That just makes me sick. Pass that around if you will. It just makes me sick to read about that. Those people they are vomit. They are the vomit of Christianity. They are the ones that other people in the world are picking up ideas of what Christianity is all about. That's what it's about to them. It's Jim and Tammy. It's people like this. And they see a group like ours, oh, you guys are a cult up there. Because they compare us with people like this. These folks are sick. Just transfer these people in a time machine, Chrissy and Charlie Brown and the group, back to the first century. They never would have allowed people like that to enter the church. They would have said, you people got to get saved before you can come to our church. These people think that they're already saved. They say, no, there's a condition to coming to church, and that is you get born again first. They knew in the first century that meant lots of things. Your life would change, persecution would come, your family would forsake you, but it doesn't mean any of those things anymore today. It's become acceptable to have religion, as long as we tone our religion down. If you will, follow me over to Proverbs chapter 31. I just have a few more things I want to say. But I call people like these people you're seeing in the article fashionable charismatics. We're seeing a lot of them. You see, Pentecostals, you've got to remember some of the background, the history and the sociology of it. Pentecostals at the turn of the century generally were drawn from the lower echelons of society. And charismatics today don't like the stigma of their forefathers. And you look at people like Bob Tilton, he's probably the most rampant one in the whole group of wanting to just dress immaculately, and his wife the same way, to be acceptable to everyone in the world. In other words, to throw off this old, Southern thought pattern that went with early Pentecostalism, that we are high-tech, high-fashion, big-time, urbanites. We are good people. We can do everything that everyone else in the world can, plus we've got an advantage. We know God. And that's just not true at all. You may have noticed that I didn't talk much about men this morning. You know why? When it comes to clothing and fashions, the Bible doesn't talk much about it. I don't think most men, and I'm sure there are some exceptions, and probably more so in our sick male society today than ever before, but I don't think males get dressed up and go puff in front of a mirror. They just put their clothes on. After all, what does a business executive have to choose from? A brown suit, a gray one, a black one, or a navy blue one? You don't really have a big choice. You got to go looking like tree bark to work every day. They don't have a big choice. I don't think it's a big deal. The New Testament, the Old, they don't address that matter. I'm not saying that men couldn't be proud also. It does address the issue of women, though. And I have often thought of this over my Christian experience because of my earlier background and training in ornithology and the study of birds. Why is it in nature the brightest colors are for the males? Females are always the dull colors. Say, well, I know the answer. That's easy. That's to protect them and to protect the young. Hey, that's a good argument. Why not protect you and you're young now? The father was the one that stood out way on the top of the limb and threw his chest out and let every bird in the village see that he was there. And the mother, with dull colors, look at a cardinal. Look at a lot of the birds. The mother is the one with dull colors. God gave that in nature. And he gives it in his word in Scripture also. And yet we come to this current day Christian view, and it's almost everything has been reversed. The father goes in a dull suit to work every day, and the mother wears yellows and greens and oranges and reds, color that calls attention to you. Bright clothing, expensive clothing, stylish clothing that attracts attention. I hope I'm giving something for all of you, and particularly some of you women, to think about. I think you need to think about it in your life. We have gone through this in our family, in my own home. I didn't tell my wife what to wear, what not to wear. You have to understand, sometimes we have a home relationship that will never be like yours, because I'm not only her husband but her pastor. And that makes for a different relationship. But I never told her what to wear. We went through a situation, as everyone in this church knows, about a few years ago with this clothing bit. And I was so proud of her, because after going through that, of her own volition, I said nothing about it. She came to me and she said, these clothes, these colors are wrong. She said, I'm going to burn all of it. She burned all of her dresses, all of her shoes. She burned everything. I was proud of her. I didn't say anything to her about it. I was proud of her for doing that. She owns a few dresses now. And that's, all of you women know that. She owns a few dresses now. She burned the rest of them. You see, in this society we put, and I've taken a lesson through her experience and her actions in my own life. In our society, we put way too much emphasis on clothes. You only need a few outfits. You don't need 50 different ways to dress. You just need a few outfits. And we have a moratorium on buying of clothes in our family. Well, the children grow, so they'll need something new. And I'll talk about that later, in children and their dress. But for us, I don't need any clothes. I don't need any until everything I have is gone. I gave some suits away. I got too many suits. Well, I got way too many of them. I can only wear one at a time. I gave them away to some people here in the church and threw some other stuff away. And we're just waiting till all of them wear out, all my clothes and her clothes. We'll buy a couple of new suits and a couple of new dresses in. And you know, it's a big savings financially. It's a big savings mentally. Just go in there, you've got a few outfits. But we had a closet that was full of clothes. I mean, we had a lot of clothes. I still do have a lot of clothes. I'm just wearing them, waiting till they wear out. They will. Or if you need some, you can have them. I told her, I said, I'll be satisfied, except for the case where you've got to have it clean all the time, and that puts too much responsibility on her to have it washed every day. I said, I'd be satisfied with one shirt, one pair of pants. I'd wear it all the time. Why would I have to change? It doesn't do anything for me, and it shouldn't do anything for anyone else. So I do keep the practical things in consideration. I do take them into consideration, that I don't want her to have to wash every day. You've got to have enough to build up clothes so she can wash them. But beyond that, I don't have any need for it. Saying that it doesn't really speak to men, but I have learned a lesson, and I intend very much for the rest of my life to put this into practice, because I'm dead serious about it. The whole clothing industry and fashion is wrong in our country. It's deceptive. And it just sucks up the gullible right along with it. I think women need to be very careful in what they wear that's not fashionable. It doesn't call attention to itself. It doesn't cause you to look in the mirror and feel proud over what you have on. Find something simple, that's neat, that's presentable, that's basic, that's plain, that's ordinary. And I think you'll be the better for it in your life. Proverbs 31:10. So I don't want you to not have heard from me what our own personal testimony is. I'm never afraid to admit that I've been wrong about something, because I'm smart enough to know as soon as you can admit you're wrong about something, you can get right. Till you do that, you never will. My wife was willing to burn every stitch of it. All those fancy clothes with color, she just threw them in. We got a burning barrel in the backyard. It's been used for many things. God bless that burning barrel. Just burned it. Well, isn't that a waste of... I don't listen to stupid arguments like that. I'm not going to waste my spiritual life. I'd rather learn the lesson now than have to answer to God later. And I think this does apply to children, and I'm probably going to run out of time today, and I won't be able to address that, so maybe we'll pick up next time and talk about that. Who can find, verse 10, Proverbs 31, who can find a virtuous woman, for her price is far above rubies? See, if you just like an Olds Cutlass, then drive an Olds Cutlass, but make sure it's for the right reason. Make sure you're not buying anything to be in style with anybody else. You buy it because you like it personally, because it functions the way you want it to, and that's what you're going to do. Then I don't think it matters what you want to own, within limits, of course. I don't think that there's any need or any right to have all these expensive items that we're always encouraged to buy. Buy the items, they scream at you at the store. Buy me, just pick me up. Don't buy me, just pick me up and look at me for a few moments. You don't have to buy me, just look at me. Well, you know what the end of that story is, though. Right in the cart and right up to the register. Buy what you need. You don't have to impress anybody. Who can find a virtuous woman? Her price is far above rubies. The heart of her husband doth safely trust in her, so that she shall have no need of spoil. He, rather. She will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeketh wool and flax, and worketh willingly with her hands. She is like the merchant's ships, she bringeth her food from afar.
For the continuation of
She seeketh wool and flax, and worketh willingly with her hands. She is like the merchant's ships, she bringeth her food from afar. She riseth also while it is yet night, and bringeth meat to her household, and a portion to her maidens. She considereth a field, and buyeth it. With the fruit of her hand she planteth a vineyard. She girded her loins with strength, and strengtheneth her arms. She perceiveth that her merchandise is good, and her lamp goeth not out by night. She layeth her hands to the spindle, and her hands hold the distaff. She stretcheth out her hand to the poor, yea, she reacheth forth her hands to the needy. She is not afraid of the snow for her household, for all her household are clothed with scarlet. She maketh herself coverings of tapestry. Her clothing is, well, it should be fine linen and purple, not silk. Her husband is known in the gates when he sitteth among the elders of the land. She maketh fine linen, and selleth it, and delivereth belts unto the merchant. Strength and honor are her clothing. Strength and honor are her clothing. And she shall rejoice in time to come. I think there's a hint there of an eschatological time to come. She'll be in such a relationship to God that she'll be able to stand before Him, as I think we heard this morning, with boldness. Not with fear, but with boldness, as we read in 1 John 4. If we do His commandments and please Him, then we won't have to fear the day of judgment. She'll rejoice in the eschatological time to come because she's done her duty, and God will say, "Well done, woman. You were the type of woman that I intended womankind to be." She openeth her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. And if she doesn't have wisdom, she keeps her mouth closed then. Women in our society just talk to be talking. Said she opens her mouth with wisdom. The opposite would be, and the same is true with the man. This would apply to all of us. If you don't have anything wise to say, you shouldn't say. She looketh well to the ways of her household, and eateth not the bread of idleness. Her children arise up and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praiseth her. Many daughters have done virtuously, but thou excellest them all. Favor is deceitful, and beauty is vain, but a woman that feareth the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her of the fruit of her hands, and let her own works praise her in the gates. Isn't that a beautiful poetic description of what true womanhood is all about? That she's a good woman, that she does good things. Doesn't say anything about, well, she was fashionable or in style or she knew how to chit-chat with all the women. She just was a good woman. So, in conclusion this morning, I would recommend that there be a de-emphasis, and maybe more so than some of you women have caught in some of the other hints that I have said or what my wife has done, that there be a de-emphasis on this clothing bit. I think we are missing the message of the gospel if what we're after, clothes, clothes, clothes. More outfits, more outfits. I realize you've got to have maternity outfits and in-between outfits and 8 months outfits and 3 months outfits and minus 2 months outfits. But even there, you can keep all of that in some type of limit or boundary. You just don't need endless clothes. It's not, in other words, it's no glory to you if you've got a packed closet. That's no mark of spiritual distinction to have a packed closet. Have the clothes that are practical. So many clothes aren't practical that they sell at the store, especially for a mother. They're not practical. Have something that's practical, that is neat, that is, let me use the word, ordinary, that's just ordinary. No one looks at that and says, wow, you look so gorgeous today. It's just ordinary. It's not ugly. Maybe it is. It doesn't matter if it's ugly. It's not dirty, let's say. It's somewhere plain, ordinary. It doesn't call attention to itself. No one turns their head a second time to look. I think you can wear even dull colors and still be real fashionable. So you know what I'm talking about. Certain types of clothes are just so, and it takes some shopping or some thinking to come across them sometimes in our society, where it's all geared toward the other. That there are certain clothes that it would never turn your head in attention. Never turn your head yay or nay, that it was so bad or so good. It was just, they had on clothes is all I can remember. And I've got people that can vouch for me in this church, if you think that I've been observing what you've been wearing, that 99% of the time is not true. All we have to do is get home, and my wife said, well, did you see what they had on, or they were up there, or they were the one, we'll be somewhere, they were the one that was talking who had the certain colored dress or certain colored sport coat on. Say, I didn't see them. I don't ever even notice what they have on. I just don't even look at that. Sometimes I do, but for the vast majority of the time, I never even notice it. If you try to describe somebody by their clothes, I won't notice it. It'll have to be by some other criteria. I think I'll come back to it, if I may, one more time next week, and I want to talk about children and their clothing and just a few things about the raising of children. We certainly don't want to encourage in children what you're discouraging for yourself. Believe it or not, your children, with the way you dress or something, as they mature and get older, you're sending messages to them. By what you do, by what you wear, you're sending messages to them. Baby, this is what's important to Mommy and Daddy, the way we dress. They see you spending all your time dressing up. They know you're sending a message to them. This is important to Mommy, that I've got to be really nice looking for everyone. We need to be careful of that. We've got to raise our children better than that. I don't want some child who's sick like the rest of the world, who thinks everything is based on what a person looks like outwardly. I don't want a sick child like that, a spoiled brat. I want them to know that there's a lot more to life. Thank you, brother. That there's a lot more to life than what you have on.